Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Perhaps this reality is somewhat unique to more rural parts of the country. But when I was growing up in western Pennsylvania, the town of Ligonier served as a sort of hub for a group of other towns that were much less, what's the word for it? Townish. They were more like neighborhoods, and often much more poor. And those neighborhoods were the basic elements from which we drew our sports teams, our little league teams, our midget football teams. But then when it came to school and we got older, we're all going to school together. I mention all this because my experience was that each one of these little communities, whether it was Stallstown, whether it was Waterford, whether it was Donegal or New Florence, each one of these places, and probably for each age group, they all had their best athlete, the one guy who was head and shoulders above the rest. Well, our guy in Stallstown was Terry Grimm, who's today's hero you never heard of. Terry was the quarterback of our football team. He was our ace pitcher, and when he wasn't pitching, he was playing shortstop. Terry was a year ahead of me in school, but he was the baby of his family. In fact, when I knew Terry and I was grade school, junior high, and he was in grade school and junior high, Terry had already adult, grown, married siblings, one of which, Vic Grimm, was actually my Little League coach for several years. Well, Terry was, again, the best athlete. But that's not why he was a hero to me when I was growing up. There were lots of good athletes. There were, as I mentioned, every small community had their own. What's made Terry stand out to me was his friendliness, his grace, his humility. There was not a prideful bone in his body. Now, he wasn't a sad sack going around like, oh, I'm no good. But he wasn't boastful, and he was encouraging to his teammates, sometimes in a kick in the butt kind of way, which would be appropriate, because he wanted to win. But he was friendly. Now, who knows? Maybe he was kind to me because one of the other great athletes, close to Terry in giftedness, but not quite up to Terry's level, was my friend Randy Gooder, who was my next door neighbor, and he was friends with Randy, and that sort of made him be nice to me. That could have been it. I don't know. What I do know is that he wasn't faking it. What I do know is he's still the same guy. In our little community of Stallstown, spread out over I don't know how many square miles, but we were spread out, and we were not many. Our little elementary school shut down, I think when I was in 5th grade, something like that, for lack of students. It probably only had K through 6th grade. At its peak, it probably only had 150 students. So, again, people knew each other. Well, Terry ended up marrying one of my sister's closest friends who lived down the hill from the study center, April Hood. And they have built a house just down the street from the study center where they live to this day. And they are members in good standing at the church that I grew up in. And so I get an opportunity to see Terry from time to time. And when I do, again, same guy, still handsome as could be. He was handsome then. Still in good shape. He was in good shape then. And still smiling. Now, when you're a kid and you have these sort of different layers of heroes, you have your professional sports heroes. There were kids in high school when I was in grade school that I looked up to. And then there was, Terry, who was just a year ahead of me. You have this idea that your heroes are going to end up succeeding all the way to the top. Literally, when I look back at every single sports hero that I ever had locally growing up, I can think of one athlete from that whole area who ever played Division I college sports. And he was a kicker for Purdue. Our star, when I was in grade school, when I was in the high school football team, Barry Roddy was the running back, and he was really good, and he got a free ride to college, but it was a Division II or III school. And I don't even know that he did well there. I mean, it's a big world. And the same thing is true with Terry. I don't know where Terry went to school. I know that Terry did not become a professional athlete. He wasn't that good. He was just gifted. He was just comfortable. He was just, well, he loved the games. Well, and I looked up to him. And I still do. It's time once again for our Curating Your Movie Library segment, and I am once again joined by my partner across the aisle, Mrs. Lisa Sproul. Sweetheart, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the truth, peek behind the curtain, we already did one of these today, just a moment ago. We finished talking about a YouTube video that we watched that was very informative for us, we were grateful for. But now we're getting back to typical entertainment. And we're going to talk about the movie that was just recently released on Netflix called Enola Holmes. I think this was one that I picked out because I happen to be a pretty big fan of Sherlock Holmes. I just enjoy him. And maybe we'll talk about this eventually. We've been watching some of the BBC Sherlock's with Benedict Cumberbatch and enjoying that too. And what I like about things like this, Enola Holmes, I like being brought into the Sherlock Holmes world and having it expanded beyond what we already know. I mean, it was fascinating, and as you've pointed out before we started recording, a fair amount of feminist propaganda in it, but it was fascinating, wasn't it, to watch Sherlock Holmes' mother in the process of raising Enola. Enola is the younger daughter, or younger sister rather, of Sherlock and Mycroft. And so it's sort of like I don't know, just a deeper painting of the Sherlock Holmes world. And so by that alone, I was interested in watching it and enjoyed it. Now, not only did we have the whole feminist propaganda in the way that Enola was trained by her mom, which, by the way, I don't think anybody would object to. It's the painting of it as if those mean men would hate the fact that she's learning these things. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking that when the two brothers came back,
Yeah.
they didn't really know their sister. They hadn't seen her.
Right.
And they had also been trained in the same way by their mom, which was much book learning, reading dictionaries, reading encyclopedias. I mean, she was equipping them to live on their own, but Enola backwards is alone.
Yes.
So alone Holmes. And then she basically, just one day, when it came of age, she left her clues, and
The mom did
the
for
mom
Enola.
did,
Mm-hmm.
and the homemaker was still there, the housekeeper was still there, but I'll let you go ahead and venture that. But I thought, we see this mother, she didn't just do it with Enola. We get the idea that she's raised the other two children the same way.
Yes. And in fact, I think we learned that the father died young. But you get this, Mycroft and Sherlock sort of represent, to a degree, this unthinking, women shouldn't be thinking kind of mindset, which is odd given the fact that they were so well trained by their mom. But we do see and we do celebrate Enola as she sort of unpacks and follows these clues, and with her older brother sort of bumbling along behind her.
It's somewhat isolating, though. I mean, I think how you see they don't have great family dynamics, but Enola is very drawn to Sherlock, and there's a little bit more. And I think the mom sees that Sherlock had a little bit more tenderness and compassion, and he has the aptitude to see she's a smart cookie.
Yes.
He's not familiar with his sister, but
he is an observational detective.
Yes, he is.
And so he can certainly see in his sister, hey, she's got the skill set. Although what's ironic, of course, when they first come together, not literally, because
off the train.
Yes, when she gets
they
off,
don't even know her.
Yeah, they walk right past
Right.
her,
and she shouts him right out. But she had been a student of them.
Yes,
and she knew all of Sherlock's cases. And
yes,
she could point. I mean, that's a sweet moment for those men to know that their biggest fan was in their sister that they didn't really even know.
Yes, and that was a positive thing. Another positive thing, say compared to the couple of Robert Downey Jr. versions, there wasn't so much slapstick in it. I mean, it wasn't heavy and dark, but it wasn't silly either. I think it hit a real nice sweet spot where it was sweet, but some level of drama about, is this mystery going to be solved or not?
Right, and the mystery was she was abandoned by her mom.
Yeah, where's
suddenly,
Mom?
All of a sudden, one day. And so you see kind of her having to figure that out and get moved through her emotion, and then she starts to find the clue, and she finds her mom. And at the end, her mom apologizes to her, but tells her this is the way that it has to be.
Yeah. Which I do hope means there's going to be more. I mean, it is common for Hollywood to not just create movies, but to create franchises, and this may be one of those. I think, I remember when probably Rocky IV came out. I was so excited about it. I enjoyed it so much that I was completely sold and said, I don't care if there's 100 of them. I will be first in line for Rocky 100. And then I saw Rocky V and changed all that. That said, pretty much anything with Sherlock Holmes in it, I'm going to want to see. And I was not disappointed in this. It was not a blockbuster. It wasn't a life changer, but it was fine. So, sweetheart, I appreciate you being with me. I appreciate you being with me when we watch the movies. I love you, and we'll be back again at the movies.
All right, love you too. Bye-bye.
Should Christians obey the Old Testament law? Of course. Well, wait. It's complicated. Most Christians agree that we are not to obey what Bible scholars call the ceremonial law. The notion that a believer must be circumcised was a critical battle while the New Testament was being written. and the apostles were clear that such was not only not required, but that those who did require it preached another gospel. Paul, in Galatians 5:12, even goes so far as to wish that those who taught that view would emasculate themselves. Christians disagree about the responsibility of the state to enforce the civil law that God gave to his people Israel. That is, the laws it relates to government. This is that portion of the law that called for the state to punish evildoers. What then of the moral law? There are moral laws in the Old Testament that were neither ceremonial, part of the sacrificial system, nor civil. When, for instance, God forbids coveting our neighbor's goods, there is no ceremonial instruction as to what should be done with those who do covet. Neither is there given a punishment from the state. Coveters were not, in Old Testament Israel, subject to jail or fines or flogging under the local sheriff. All Christians are indeed required by God to obey his moral law, even that which he gave in the Old Testament. Some Christians, however, object. They say we're under grace, not law. That Christ, not Moses, is our lawgiver. They argue that the law is a school teacher that drives us to Christ, to which I heartily concur, as long as we're careful. We are under grace and not under law. That is, our Father is pleased with us already because his Son lived a righteous life for us and suffered the wrath of his Father in our place. The law can no longer condemn us. But we do not, in turn, sin all the more that grace may abound, as Paul says in Romans 6:1. Christ is likewise indeed our lawgiver. And as our lawgiver, he tells us that not one jot or tittle of the law shall pass away until the heaven and earth pass away. In Matthew 5:18. And finally, the law is, as stated, a school teacher. It powerfully exposes our inability to please God. It reveals our sin. It is the mark that we so dreadfully miss. How this truth, that the law is our school teacher, that this truth could lead us to believe that we therefore don't have to obey the law, honestly dumbfounds me. If we have no obligation to keep the law, how in the world can the law drive us to Christ? If it shows us our failure, are we then not called to strive to succeed? Not only do I not understand why someone would feel the need to toss one use of the law, telling us what God requires of us, in order to protect a second use, showing us our need for Christ, but I don't see how one can be even preserved without the other. Now, we need to admit this. Of course, the Old Testament doesn't come color-coded with ceremonial laws highlighted in red, civil laws in blue, and moral in yellow. That's not a service that God the Holy Spirit provided for us, which is why I say it's complicated. But as we wrestle with these issues, let's be on guard against our own antinomian, that is, anti-law, temptations, as zealously as we guard against our Pelagian, that is, we earn God's favor through our obedience, temptations. Let's guard against our own antinomian temptations as zealously as we guard against our Pelagian temptations. Let us ever and always confess that we do not obey his law, and that we ought to. You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.